You take a look at Group B. Just look at the teams that are in Group E and then look at the team that's at the bottom. And I know it's the Europa League. I know you could say, hey, you never pay this any attention, so why does it matter that Everton are the bottom of their group? But it isn't just their performance in the Europa League, is it? It's the fact that they have absolutely stunk up the Premier League so far. They currently sit 16th in the league. Koeman's got to get sacked, hasn't he?
You know, it's unacceptable, especially in the situation they're in. I think every result counts and matters in not only the fans' eyes, but certainly now the chairman's got to be looking at this and thinking we might need to change something. This weekend they take on Arsenal. If you don't get a result there, I really think, even though it's Arsenal, I really think there might be some questions asked at the higher level.
He's gone, isn't he? Dead man walking, Paul?
Look, the way that the Premier League goes, and we all know it's result-based, he's probably got to go. But having said that, when you give a manager $200 million, which he spent, do you not just cut him just a little bit of slack? I mean, look, the pressure will come to bear with the press, the pressure will come to bear with the fans. But I think they'd be smart to just stick with him for a
Why?
few
What have you seen? What have you seen?
I just wanted to get past this Arsenal game, and I think they're going to cup games or something. I think that this is they've got a Premier League game, and I think there's a little bit of respite for him. And if he doesn't get a result, then he's done.
Yeah, more to the opposite, Paul. He spent the money. He brought in the players.
Yep.
The players are not working. Whose is responsibility? It falls on Ronald Koeman. So I'm surprised that you're saying give him a break. If I were the owner, I'm saying, wait a minute. I gave you the resources. You asked for resources. I gave you resources. You spent it. You brought this player. This player's got to deliver.
So you get the resources, so you don't give him any time to work with those resources.
Paul, I think the bigger issue is how he spent the resources.
Right.
So you sell Lukaku. You don't bring in a replacement for Lukaku, someone who can adequately replace him, and certainly he had the money to spend. Also, you let Gareth Barry go. That's sort of shocking to me. You add players like Schneiderlin, who certainly, if he has time and space, he's a good passer of the ball. He's not a ball winner. He's not tenacious. Gareth Barry would cover for so many different players, and I was very surprised. Regardless of his age, he's a player there. You don't have to spend any money to actually keep him. You just need to pay him a little bit, and that one I think is showing, along with some injuries, to have a huge effect.
Interesting stuff from Claudio Reyna, who doesn't speak out that much, really, does he, when you think about it? And what he has to say is fascinating. Our approach and our behaviour to the sport here, to coaching, to everything is just wrong. We're far too arrogant. We're far too obnoxious. We have coaches who think they're better than they are. You go to a U14 and U15 coach in Spain, and they are 10 times more humble than a U14 or U15 coach in Connecticut, New Jersey, or New York, who thinks they're the next Pep Guardiola or Patrick Vieira. Until we realise that we're not as good as we think we are at all levels, then I think we're going to continue being what we are, which is mediocre. One thing I'll never say is we don't have good players, because we do. That was Reyna speaking to Goal.com. Do you agree with what he's saying?
I agree with most of what he's saying, and I agree with all of the words he's saying. I think some people are going to misconstrue it and say we don't have good coaches. That's not what Claudio is saying here. What Claudio is saying here is respect. You have to respect the game, and you're not bigger than it. You're not better than it. And unless you are Pep Guardiola or one of the best coaches in the world, you have to be more humble. You can't go into a game, or if you're talking to your parents and start, and I've seen it, and Claudio's seen it way more than anybody else, I would imagine, because he was in that position, in charge of that situation. But you have to make sure that the game is about the players, and what you're trying to do is help the players. Not, wow, you know what? We're 14-0 because I made these changes at halftime, or I subs this player in, and look at the results. The whole idea for youth sports should be about making sure your players, if you're a coach, are getting better. The results, they'll follow. And I understand that it doesn't work exactly that way in this country, because it's a results-based business, because it's now a business instead of it being a youth sport. The blend of it and what he's saying, I completely agree, but I don't want people to take it wrong, because Claudio is not saying that there's not coaches with good ideas. It's just too many coaches believe their good ideas are better than everybody else's.
Ali, what do you make of Claudio's comments?
Well, I couldn't agree more with Claudio Reina. And I lived through this and seeing my son playing every weekend. And you deal, I'm sitting there in the silence just like any other parent. And you deal with coaches all the time. And you see the information that is given to the players. And the attitude of those coaches out in the silence. And you say, my goodness, my goodness. Are this the people that are in charge of the kids? Is this the system that is going to provide a platform from which the best players in the world can come up and can really mature and can really be nurtured? It makes you question that. And Claudio Reina is involved in this as well because he sees it from his position with NYCFC. The other thing that I couldn't agree more with Claudio Reina is the part where he says we're far too arrogant. And I just don't understand. And this is perhaps from the outside looking in, from the perspective of somebody who's not American, who did not play with the U.S. men's national team. And perhaps I can see it, I can sort of withdraw myself from the situation and say, what has the United States accomplished to be this arrogant? And certainly this group of players that we saw in this World Cup qualifier, what have they done in the recent history to feel like they can be arrogant, like they can just walk on the field and beat whoever they want and whoever they can? I don't see a history of success by the United States, not in the way that you see from the top teams in the world. And oh, by the way, those top teams in the world who would have the history to have this sort of arrogance and this sort of confidence, they don't show it. They show it on the field. When they're knocking the ball around you and you're chasing around and they're scoring goals past you and they're celebrating and they're qualifying to the World Cup and they're winning World Cups, that's how they're showing it. Not posing to be something, not pretending to be something, but actually being it and living it every time that you play the game, every time you practice, every time you complete a pass, every time you score a goal. Until that's not understood by people at the root level and at the national team level, then we're going to have this conversation.
And the interesting thing coming over here, obviously, from Europe, from my perspective and having kids now in the youth setup as well, is how much of a middle-class sport soccer is in this country. You know, you can spend thousands of dollars a year just for mediocre coaches to make themselves feel great about themselves.
You're absolutely right, Dan.
Claudio mentions the fact there are good players out there. Is it the fact that the setup with the way in which money drives this sport is that we're not finding those players because obviously they're lost amongst the money that is trying to be spent?
That is a big part of it. You look at the African American and the Latin or the Hispanic American player in this country, and they're falling through the cracks. There's no reason why we have these players in our own backyard, and these Mexican clubs are coming here and finding value in these players, and we don't see value in them. They're literally plucking these players and taking them into those setups and using these players. Jonathan Gonzalez, who's playing for first place Monterrey, he's a holding mid right now, 18 years old. He manages to find worth there, but we can't find worth for him here. It's a system that's, I want to say, broken. We talk about arrogance and being obnoxious. I completely agree. What has the United States done to be arrogant? We look at Mexico, who last World Cup cycle, 12 points, the greatest footballing nation in CONCACAF, and look what almost happened to them. Who are we to think that couldn't have happened to us? Last U20, Venezuela, look what they did. What would Venezuela do with $140 to $150 million surplus with that federation? Why can Venezuela produce these players like that and we can't with all the resources we have? Obviously, we're not doing something right. Claudio Reina talks about this coaching being arrogant. I will say it's subpar, Brian. I do think it's subpar. I think we have the coaching in this country. I will say it's subpar. We have a deck of coaches, and we just keep recycling these coaches.
There's no good coaches?
No, I'm not saying there's no good coaches. I'm saying there are not enough good coaches. Yeah. We have this deck that we just keep reusing. These coaches don't succeed in a certain level, and we'll just throw them to the U17s or the U20s, or we'll put them into the special or to the Olympic program. We keep reusing these players, reusing these same people who are in charge. With nothing's changed in the last 20, 30 years. And we expect to get results all of a sudden. We are playing by different rules. The rest of the world plays by different rules. We're playing by our own rules, thinking we can get results. That's arrogance.
We're playing by rules that are preset for us, because in the past there wasn't a professional league. So you now have an infrastructure that's based on a college aspect. So parents growing up, or having their kids grow up, they want their kids to get scholarships. Now, the opportunity to play professional soccer is starting to break through. The problem is our professional setup isn't anything like the rest of the world. You don't have your U16, U17, U18, and U19 teams practicing right around the first team. They're not opportunities for those players to then be pulled up into the first team when an injury happens. And that then gives them experience in a professional realm and understanding what it takes to be a professional. And understanding, wait a second, I'm out of my depth, so I better work my butt off to get to there. And those exceptions, that are made now that we're saying about players falling through the cracks, they fall through the cracks because we're so big and we're so vast. We don't have an infrastructure set up that allows us to see every single player. And then when we see them, to be able to say, listen, I know you live 500 miles from the nearest MLS club. I know you can't necessarily drive every day. How do we get those players into our system? How do we then...
Right, but if if U.S. soccer is depending on MLS to produce these national team players, aren't we already lost? An MLS club,
what are you
their
saying?
responsibility is to strengthen that MLS club, not to strengthen domestic product. So there needs to be, it just can't be on MLS. If MLS and U.S. soccer are in bed together, there need to be mandates, need to be clauses put in there where the domestic product gets stronger. In Venezuela, how many foreigners can play?
You're bringing up the world. The world is set up that way.
But this is who we compete against.
No, the world is set up that way, Herc. The national team doesn't specifically pull players and say, here, we're gonna put you into this system.
But don't you see the problem, Brian? We're trying to do things by our own rules, and they're not working. We have to adapt to the rest of the world.
We just talked about that. But the rest of the world does. They build the clubs, the youth, the professional clubs. They have their own youth system. Then the national system takes from those clubs. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what we don't have.
Of course.
So to your point, Brian, and what I sense, and sometimes I run into this as well with youth soccer, is that how do you sell a kid on what the direct path is for him to be at the U12 level, and he wants to end up in the first team of whatever MLS team we're talking about, whether it's New England Revolution or the national team or New York Red Bulls, whatever the case may be. And there isn't a clear path. It's complicated. Because if you live 500 miles away from whatever the MLS club is, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, where is your academy system? Who do you go to? What's your option? What's your way out? And a lot of these kids that you're talking about in the Hispanic communities and the African American communities, they're looking for a way out. Yeah. And that's how many of the best players in the world actually end up being the best players in the world, because this is their way out from whatever their reality is, whatever their situation is. Yeah. And at this point, there isn't that direct path of, okay, this kid who's really talented, who we have identified, how do we get him to play on Saturdays with an MLS team? And how do we get him to play with a national team? Those players, yes, you're talking about they're getting lost. And it makes you think, if we go to the worldwide scale, how is it that a country like Iceland, that has such a smaller talent pool, comes together and figures it out? And I know that, okay, well, maybe it's easier because you have a smaller talent pool. But the truth is that if you have the resources to identify this talent and provide a clear path, then you should be able to create players at a high level with a consistency over the course of many years. And it just hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. That's why we're so desperate. Every time that a good player comes along, it's like, my goodness,
the Messiah.
This is Freddie Adu. This is this guy. This is that guy. It's Juan Agudelo. It's this other guy. How many of those names have we heard?
What's wrong with Atleti?
Good question. I think in the first game against Roma, they really just lost the opportunity, didn't take the chances that they made, and there were a lot of them against Chelsea. Of course, they weren't particularly impressive. And in this game, they were terrible, Atletico Madrid. I mean, it's not just that they were unable to win. It's that in the last 20 minutes or so, it was Karabag who had the better opportunities, or at least looked threatening every time they came forward. Karabag probably should have had a penalty, I felt, instead of the red card, although it's a kind of borderline decision. But Atletico just didn't look good at all. Away from home, they've really struggled to score goals so far this season. There seems to be a real uncertainty about who the best partner for Griezmann is. Griezmann himself hasn't played well. Obviously, without Koke, it's slightly different. But this has put them in a very, very difficult position as well.
They're going to get through the group, Sid.
Well, as I say, this is the difficult position they're in. They're in a position where they go into these final three games with quite a lot of ground to make up. There's now a very, very significant risk that they don't go through. And to be honest, if their inability to score goals isn't sorted out, then of course they won't go through. But it's not just that. It's that they're not really creating a huge amount of chances. As I say, the game against Roma was different. The game against Roma, it's true, they had more than enough chances to win that game relatively comfortably, including one right at the very end, which is just an incredible miss. But they're not quite functioning yet. And they are a side that still have some of the hallmarks of Atletico Madrid, very, very defensively strong. But they don't look right at the moment.
In the Champions League Group H, of course, Real Madrid won, Spurs won was the final score in what was a thoroughly entertaining match at the Santiago Bernabeu. It sparked a couple of debates, the main one being that Karim Benzema, Sid Lowe. Gary Lineker tweeting out that the Frenchman is overrated. It is a debate that we've had quite a few times here over the years. Where do you stand on Benzema, Sid?
Yeah, it's a debate that's recurring in Spain as well, and I think really, to some extent, it boils down to what you want from your striker, and I think what Karim Benzema has done, and bear in mind, this is a guy that has survived and prospered at Real Madrid, a club where the pressure is extremely high. If you don't perform well, you don't last, you don't stay there forever. However much of a presidential protege you are, and he is one, you don't stay there forever. And they have tried to buy strikers, by the way. They tried to buy Lewandowski, they tried to buy Luis Suarez. But I think the thing with Benzema is it comes down to what you want him to do, and he is, if you ask Cristiano Ronaldo, the best number 9 in the world to play with Cristiano Ronaldo, a guy that provides space, that understands the game really well, that facilitates the role of others, that enables Cristiano Ronaldo to score enormous amounts of goals. The problem is, of course, that even while you're doing all those kind of things, in a game like this, and actually, by the way, his Champions League record, goal scoring record, is really quite good. In a game like this, when that chance falls to him as it comes back off the post and he's 6 or 7 yards out, you expect someone to score. For what it's worth, that's not to say the greatest number 9s don't miss chances, and Ronaldo has missed some pretty bad ones recently too.
Yeah, he did. You look at the weekend against Getafe. Kane on Benzema?
At the moment, I would have to say Harry Kane. But to Sid's point, I think if you look at the body of work that Benzema has had at Real Madrid, the amount of assists, the movement that he's created, the players that he's taken away for the likes of Isco, Bale, Ronaldo to get in, I think that's not to be underrated. So I still think he's a very valued member of Real Madrid.
That's all good and well. And I appreciate hold-up play, and I appreciate somebody who facilitates space, and I appreciate all those things that perhaps go unnoticed. But if you are the center forward, center striker for Real Madrid, you're expected to score goals. That's also part of the expectation. And by the way, it's not crazy to think, oh my goodness, if you play center forward for Real Madrid, you should be scoring goals. Yes, that's part of the job. And if he continues to miss these opportunities, then of course the pressure is going to continue to come along. Because, oh, by the way, it is what you're expected to do.
John Cross, a well-sourced journalist in England working for the Mirror, saying that Mesut Ozil is telling his friends that he's going to Manchester United in January. What do you make of this, Maris?
Well, when you told me the news, Dan, I said, pardon?
Yes, but that could be your age.
Well, it could be, but it's not. And I wonder, look, Mourinho knows what he's doing, but this is a head-scratcher for me. Obviously, Pogba, we really don't know how long he's going to be coming back. Mkhitaryan, it looks as though, to me, he's going to be on the chopping block, because Mesut Ozil, for me, can only play in that 10 roles. You can't play him wide.
No.
You certainly can't play him in the holding role. That's ridiculous. So somebody in that dressing room has gone, uh-oh, that's a little bit more running for me. Obviously, Mourinho's got something up his sleeve.
Sure.
But it's a puzzler for me.
Does this fit?
I just don't see how it fits. And I say that because I think Mesut Ozil is a luxury player. And you look at what Jose demands out of every single player on Manchester United, and there are no luxuries taken. And
sure.
To Paul's point, it means a lot more running and closing down. The one thing that you will say is, one, he's different than any other player at Manchester United. And two, if you think about the way they defend, sometimes they defend a little bit deeper. They need that connector to either Lukaku or Martial or anybody that's going to get in behind. Rashford has the pace to do that. So if you get Mesut Ozil on the ball and you want to play over the top and spring someone quickly, I can see that.
But Brian, that's a massive gamble. If you're going to defend with less numbers, if you're going to say, okay, Ozil, just hang out there, wait till you get the ball and then spring the attack, that's risky.
It is. If you look at Manchester United, though, they're set up defensively. So
right.
They've got a good understanding. If it means they defend with 9 instead of 10, I think that is something they can play to. But for me, I'm with you. I don't understand the signing.
No.
There's no question that Mesut Ozil is a talented player. And there's a relationship here between Jose Mourinho and Mesut Ozil going back to the days of Real Madrid. So maybe, as many managers tend to be, the ones that can find the magic answer, the one that can say, I can get the best out of this guy.
Yeah.
I can turn around his attitude. I can change his mindset, and I can get the best out of him on the field. Maybe that's Jose Mourinho, and maybe that works for Mesut Ozil. But if you're going to ask Mesut Ozil to go defend, like you have asked everybody else to do at Manchester United, good luck with that. Because we have seen that does not work for Mesut Ozil.
Some Chelsea players not happy with Conte, not happy with his training schedule, with his regime. Why do you roll your eyes?
Well, because I think those were the same reports that happened early on last season.
Yes.
When there were issues at Chelsea, and then they go on and win the league, and then things just kind of get forgotten.
But is it like bumbling under the surface?
Well, I think the issue right now at Chelsea is not so much with the players. I think it's Conte and the front office of Chelsea, the board, whoever is running this club, because there seems to be this sort of back and forth that is going on through the press and saying where Conte is concerned about the fact that he doesn't have the strength in numbers of players that he would have wanted. And when your best option off the bench, when Morata is injured, is Michy Batshuayi, and that's it, well, then you have a problem. However, it was Antonio Conte who sent a text message to Diego Costa, and that's why Diego Costa is no longer at Chelsea. So this is on their own doing. I really don't enjoy having any of the managers complain. Because we're talking about some of the richest clubs in the world.
Sure.
So what about when the players start complaining?
That's a different matter. I mean, that's concerning, isn't it?
It is concerning. And look, if you're, as a manager, to Ali's point, if you think, well, the front office is not getting me the players that I want, I need another centre forward, I need a holding midfield, whatever I need, they're not getting it for me. And this is what I've got in the building at the moment, where I've had some poor games. I've got to work these guys. I've got to work them on the training ground. I've got to get them ready for the game. That's his job.
But is he whipping them too hard? Their legs are falling off.
Look, Conte is a top manager. He knows when the legs are falling off. Sometimes hard work for these players, maybe it's just a little bit too much for them. They've got to knuckle down and they've got to fight for the right to play for this Chelsea side.
Is he going to be there at the end of the season?
I hope so. I love him.
You really do love him?
Yep, I love him.
That's passion.
Is it the hair?
No, it's not so much the hair. I'll tell you what it is. It stems from watching him on the sidelines at City last year when they beat him 3-1 and absolutely killed Pep Guardiola at coaching. He was lights out and he kept his players honest.
Why do you hate Pep Guardiola?
Wow.
Did I say that?
What a development.
Wow.
Breaking news.
Wow.